Success has many fathers. Failure is an orphan. That's where we're going to start the reviewing of the Blue Bomber series. I figured we'd start with the very low and then work our way up. As anybody who may be familiar, this game has a lot of issues. I know the easy picking is the voice acting, but we'll leave Dr. Light alone. There's just a side of showing an example of it. There's really no need to talk about it.
Dr. Light, what is the problem?
A strange meteor has fallen to Earth just a while ago. This meteor seems to be emitting a powerful energy signature. Something this powerful must not fall into the hands of evil.
To be fair, the voice acting all around has issues, from how it's translated to how it is used. Even the cutscenes, there's really no need for them. This is the problem with anybody who's been a fan of either the Blue Bomber series or even the X series, is that they built up to this. like 10 years of games built up to this, and this is what they presented. A handful of visually not looking too bad, but cutscenes that really aren't doing anything.
Shut up!
When it comes down to it, there really isn't a need for story in a Mega Man game. You can see it from how it progressed from 1 and 2, but then as it gets into 3, as it gets into 4, 5, 6, 7, they keep on adding in more and more and more and more. Not to say that it's not unwelcomed, it's just, for whatever reason, they never really did a good job of learning how to tell a story in that medium. Probably the closest that it got to being decent was with the latter ones. Even 7 did alright to a degree, but particularly 9, 10. Like I said before, this is a culmination of 10 years of working with this series, as well as with the X series, as well as with the Mega Man Game Boy game. And this is what they came up with. That's why this... I get some people don't dislike this game. Some people actually really enjoy it. I'm definitely not one of those people. It doesn't look too bad. I will say this, the brighter color made it a little bit more appealing over time. Initially it was very off-putting, but nowadays when I go through it, particularly for this look back, not as put off by it. I do still prefer the more subdued colors with Mega Man base, but this could be worse. The gameplay for the most part is similar, but this is another thing where it feels like similar to the first stepping stones with 7. This feels like a very deliberate attempt to divorce itself as much as possible away from the X series. Like, the X series gets super serious and things are happening, it's very grave. Here you get the Saturday morning cartoon special of Evil from Space. I'm kind of wondering if they weren't inspired by the, Shoemaker comet that hit Jupiter in 94. That's kind of the setup. They make it sort of silly, which is fine, that's not the problem, but coupled with the voice acting, plus the gameplay itself. Part of the issue is that Mega Man feels like he's running through sludge. It feels like he's going about 3/4 of the normal speed that he would in... Coupled with that, a quarter of the game, maybe even like a third of it, maybe not that much, but a sizable chunk of it is spent doing stuff that's not very Mega Man-esque. You had a little bit of that in parts of Mega Man 3. It's an absolute necessity to use the rush jet. Mega Man 5 had it with Waveman's, half of his stage being on the jet boat. In this one, you have this sizable portion of one stage being devoted to a colorful Gradius side-scroller shooter there, and then you have a Dr. Wily stage built partially for it, mostly for it, including its boss. Same thing with Frostman stage, which feels like it was on the cutting room floor of Mega Man X, and it's like, we really like this, but we're not going to use this for Mega Man X series stage, so just give it to Frostman. It has a couple boarding sections, which aren't too bad, but then the first Wily stage is 4/5 of one, which is not only obnoxious, but you have just the jump, slide thing. Kind of annoying. To me, that's a bit of an issue, because it's like, why are they doing this? The only thing I can think of is it's like they played the base form of the game. I'm like, this isn't really enjoyable. They added in the Mega Ball. The Thunderclaw has the ability to grapple onto bolts to kind of swing. That's in limited spaces. But they didn't do much to try to figure out a way to implement those weapons much more beyond that. There's a couple times where you can use weapons to raise the water level and stuff, which is fine to just use the Buster, but It is nice when they're able to implement using the weapons to help make the sections easier. And they're just kind of there, and mainly there just to deal with the bosses themselves. Speaking of the bosses, a couple of them do stand out. Myself, I like the look of and the idea of Tengu Man. Astro Man's not the worst. I don't mind Aquaman, and some people are like, oh, well, you know, they keep on rehashing these. It's like, oh, well, you have Aquaman, but you also had Bubble Man, and you have all this stuff. It's like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Eventually, they'd come out with, like, Splash Woman, and then Pump Man and stuff like that. I don't have a problem with it. I only say this because because of the flack that 10 got for having some of the more sillier ones, like Sheep Man or Strike Man. I believe the baseball one and stuff, and they're like, oh, we'll see how silly it is. So you have some fans that get really upset with the thematic repetition versus some fans who are just upset by this. Oh, it's a completely different thing. As long as it's an interesting thing to play through, platforming, running gun, what's the big deal? Unless it's like really obscene. I don't get it myself. The only one that's kind of annoying, I don't mind from a thematic standpoint, but more so from the music, is Clown Man. That's the big thing that gets to me, and it's not just the Clown Man stage, musically wise. It's more of the stages all around, similarly with the boarding and using Rush Jet as just the side-scroller thing. A lot of times it doesn't seem to be a lot of effort put into having very strong, tight stages. They get a bit more experimental. Swordman has these different trials you have to complete to unlock to get through the stage, which isn't bad. It's like, okay, Astro Man's got a maze, which is kind of neat. That's a little bit of the problem. It's like, oh, it's kind of neat. It doesn't do anything. There's no oomph to it. They're like, it's really annoying, or it's just kind of there. And it felt like a lot of times they were just trying to be more clever than they were trying to hone down something, especially when you get to the Wily stages. It's the same sort of efforts, just made a bit more difficult. And it's like, oh, okay. Is there really anything thematically interesting about the Wily stages? Not really. They're pretty cut and dry, and even the ones that are more regular don't really have that much to them. Stage 3 probably stands out the most just because it has a little bit more of a struggle with the platforming, but beyond that, I guess I should also mention this is one of the few times in that stage that you actually use a different item that has a utility, which is the Tornado Hold, Tengu's weapon, which allows you to increase your jump height and stuff like that. But that's the only time I used it myself. Beyond that, there really wasn't much really need, other than, I guess, technically the Swordman stage. But when it's used as a way that you have to get through it as opposed to just as another method to get through it, I don't think it's quite as much of a use of utility as it is for a necessity. To me, that is not nearly as interesting. For example, take the cutter weapon, the wheel cutter, in one of the later Mega Man games, and how you can use that to scale walls really, really quickly and stuff. That's you having a utility outside of just the forced function of it, which I really like. I think that's a pretty cool and clever way of going about it, instead of this apparently clever but just oh, that's cool. Also of note, one of characters that I really enjoy, Bass, he sort of shows up in this. He's in it for that horrendous opening, and then you just randomly come across him to fight him. At least with 7, when he was introduced, there's a couple instances. You have this poor scripted fight right at the beginning, and then you have this sort of, oh, he's been injured, you're gonna help him and stuff. And then it's like, oh, nope, surprise. You have a fight with him in this one that kind of is out of the blue, but it's like saying Proto Man comes in out of the blue. Because he's Blues Man. For somebody who's supposed to be the rival, it's not very well done. And that's what I say for pretty much all these fights. The only thing that really felt that made it more akin to having some interest, like some difficulty to it, mind you, difficulty does not equate that it's a good game, is the fact that you're not allowed to have E-tanks. There's no E-tanks in this game. I do like that choice, because what it does is, towards the end, it forces the player to have to perfect what they're doing. For myself, I'm terrible with using the flame sword, so when I fought Dr. Wily, even though that's his weakness, I just used the Mega Buster. And also, because of the ability to collect bolts, up to 40 of them in the game through all the different stages, you can use them to buy upgrades for the Mega Buster, as well as just some odds and ends. A special weapon energy reducer, so you have more uses of your specials and stuff like that. Last point of order is the soundtrack. I'm not a fan of it. It honestly sounds like they stole a burned CD from a local cafe to use as their soundtrack. The stages sound more like menu music. That's not very exciting. Doesn't mean it has to be super hyper aggressive, but not a lot of melody sticks out to me. Yeah, overall the soundtrack was not very impressive to me. Nothing really sticks out too horribly well. If it's not very impressionable, at least for me, when it doesn't do much in the way to impress me, outside of, being like horrific or something like that, that are just way out of tune. But if it doesn't impress, then I feel like the music has failed to do its job. I get some people prefer some of the more ambient stuff, but take for example Donkey Kong Country. Even though it's technically a bit more on the ambient side, that can still impress. I don't feel that this did that. It was inoffensive, but mediocre. And that's really it. Like I said before, this game is in a culmination of roughly 10 years of making these kind of games, and this is what they provided. This is what they offered. Does it look like it? Generation jumps and stuff? They at least shrunk Mega Man a little bit to fit. Too bad he's slower than molasses. Does it feel like it? Not when a sizable chunk of the game doesn't play like Mega Man. Not to say that they shouldn't try to do at least some things differently, but they did in earlier renditions of the game, in the series. They introduced the slide. They introduced what some people thought was a bad idea, but the Mega Buster. They at least tried different things. I don't condemn them for trying something different, but in the same hand, when it doesn't pan out, it falls flat on your face, this is what you get. You get something like 8. Certain people will be the defenders of this game. Even though this game, I'm not going to talk about it in this, it'll probably be its own little side-off, because I'm just going to do the numerical Blue Bomber ones. Mega Man Base is another one of those that has its staunch defenders, very few of them that there may be. I feel like that's the same thing for this game. There are some of those people who are very staunchly defend this game, really enjoy its music, really enjoy how it plays and stuff. I'm not one of them. I don't think this is a good game to start people on, because I don't think it really speaks to the series as a whole. It's its own little thing, and that's why I would put that quote. I don't think the creators and the producers and everything, when they think of the series as a whole, look to this one as, that was the crowning achievement. I think it really says something, partially because of the times, partially because of all the different other types of Mega Man games going on, but also if the game wasn't nearly as poor in its performances, whether through like sales and stuff like that, I don't think it would have stopped the Blue Bomber series in its tracks. If people had enjoyed it and continued to enjoy it, and it had been something that really, really continued that flow, instead of continuing to bog down the series with more story stuff that they didn't necessarily need. We didn't need, Dr. Wily is super evil, look at this evil space energy, that really no need for it. And just kept it simple, just kept it to it, instead of bogging it down with shifting gears, trying to show how different it was from the X series. If it hadn't done that, it wouldn't have taken as long as it did for 9 to come out.
Say goodnight!